One of the sub-elements of the element of intellectual development, which deals with our intellectual cognitive health, is the idea of teachability. Teachability is, by definition, an intellectual humility that regularly pursues new ideas, challenging my pre-existing mental frameworks and methods. So there's a level of humility demonstrated in teachability that is a proactive, regular pursuit of new ideas with the goal of being challenged and challenging both my mental frameworks, the way I think about things, and the way I actually behave. And if we're Christ followers and we are gospel-centered people, the idea of being teachable is not something that is new. We generally embody this in our own discipleship journey as we follow Jesus, as we embody even the definition of being a disciple, that being a learner. Someone who, as Jesus says, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. We are learning to be more like Jesus and to live like Jesus in our everyday lives. However, when it comes to leadership, this is a little bit more difficult for us to embody. Because as leaders, we are ultimately responsible, usually, for setting the direction, the vision, helping people get to where we need to go, and essentially viewing ourselves as the subject matter expert who is teaching and leading other people. And so we are employing methods based on things that we believe about the best way to lead and the best way to achieve what we want to achieve. But teachability is so critically important as we navigate leadership in the 21st century because everything is changing so rapidly. Culture is changing. So the second we think we've got a handle on what's going on around us, it changes, and we have to change as well. Technology changes so rapidly that it is a constant disruption. And the second we think we've got it mastered or we've implemented it and using it effectively, it changes. And ultimately, leadership is a people business. So people change. People change minute by minute, hour by hour. They wake up, they didn't have a great night's sleep, they're a little bit more grumpy than they were, they're not responsive to your leadership, they had a bad meal, they didn't get their coffee, something's going on in their life, there's big issues happening. People change, and people change constantly. And so if we, as leaders, want to find the best methods and the best ways to lead people and lead our organization, then we have to be teachable. We have to embrace an intellectual humility that not only is passive in our understanding of new ideas, but regularly pursues new ideas so that we can be challenged with intentionality and we can find new ways of doing things. One of the best examples that I found in this is that as I was doing some of my reading and research on leadership, I found a book by a gentleman named Thomas Kuhn, and he paints a great picture of what this teachable, this pursuit of new ideas, how it actually happens in our lives. And I think if we take this and we internalize it for our own lives and also in our leadership lives, we're going to meet with a lot of success. And here's kind of how it works. And he is framing it in the context of how does science change? And he says that what are the structures of scientific revolutions? When you look through history, all of the quote unquote science that was settled science suddenly finds a new science and debunks the old. And how does that actually happen? Thomas Kuhn paints a picture of a 4-part cycle that demonstrates and models what this changing, this revolution in the way we view the world, how it happens. He says the first part is that everybody has an existing paradigm in which we view the world. Scientists, based on the current scientific research, says this is why things happen. You and I have that in the way we live. We look at the world, we have a worldview, and we say this is why the world is the way it is. In our leadership, we have a way in which we think great leadership looks like. We have a leadership point of view that says this is good leadership and these are the methods that I'm going to employ to be a good leader. The problem is that we are going to eventually find ourselves in a new circumstance. And if you're in the scientific world, you would say they find a serious anomaly in their scientific paradigm. In your own world, in your own life, in your own worldview, you're going to find an anomaly, something that you've experienced that your worldview can't necessarily account for. In leadership, you're going to find a circumstance or a situation or a person that your methods and your leadership point of view cannot effectively lead well. This is the serious anomaly phase. This anomaly then creates a bit of a paradigm crisis or a worldview crisis. I cannot account for why my current paradigm and my current leadership approach isn't working to solve the problem that's created by this new situation or this anomaly. And ultimately, my paradigm, my worldview, or my leadership point of view has to change, and I develop new ideas and new methods, and I employ them, and I see success, and then those new methods, those new worldviews, those new paradigms become my existing paradigm. And that cycle happens repeatedly over and over. Now, as you can see, this happens in the scientific world, it happens in our own individual lives, and it happens in our leadership lives. We are constantly being presented with new information, new ideas, and new circumstances that force us to adapt and find different methods. But when we think of teachability and the intellectual humility connected to teachability, we don't want to be passive and wait for a circumstance or an anomaly to show up which forces us to change our paradigm or our leadership style. We want to be proactive in pursuing these ideas that bring us that challenge and that reorganization and redesign of our ideas and methods before we find ourselves in a situation that demands it. And this is really where teachability is of critical importance. The second part of this 4-part cycle is that we're going to experience a new circumstance, or we're going to experience an anomaly that we can't understand. But if we are teachable and we pursue new ideas, we are going to expose ourselves to these great ideas, and there's a bunch of ways we can expose ourselves to them. We can listen to podcasts, we can read books, we can talk to fellow leaders, we can have great conversations with people who are completely outside of our field. We can do all sorts of great ways to expose ourselves to new ideas before we actually experience the situation that we would find ourselves in, where we would have to have these conversations. So teachability allows me to adapt and change my methods before I have to, before there's a lot to lose. And I'll give you an example of this. I was a Marine for 13 years, and much of the Marine Corps officer training involves what they call tactical decision-making games, a TDG. And what they do is they put you in a room, they put you in a time-compressed environment, they say, here's the situation, and build a plan out. Build a quick plan, decide what to do, and then you're going to brief all your fellow officers, all 49 of them in your 50-person platoon, who are evaluating you, who give you they rank you 1 through 50. Every class, you get a ranking, and they determine how good of an officer you are. So you have to brief this. And why is it so helpful? It's so helpful because you are putting yourselves, or being put in a position where you have to think through things and come up with a decision and a paradigm, a leadership point of view, a way in which you think it's going to work, and you have to put it into place, and then you get challenged. And then they break it down and they tell you why you're wrong, essentially. And you really essentially learn through failure in these circumstances. And it matters because in the world of the Marine Corps, we don't want to develop leaders. We don't want to be leaders where we suddenly are confronted with a tactical decision in the midst of a shooting war, because there's a lot to lose. The time for deciding what to do and how to do it and to challenge my ideas is not when somebody is actively shooting at me. We're going to do that in a whole bunch of circumstances and environments prior to that, when there's not a lot to lose. And so if you would equate that to our own individual lives, I want to be proactively learner and demonstrate intellectual humility to challenge my ideas before I find myself in a life-changing situation that I have to account for. I have to think about why is my worldview the way it is, and why does this situation not line up with my worldview? I can't make sense of it. Or if you're a leader, how do you challenge your methods, challenge your ideas with podcasts, with professional development, with all sorts of wonderful tools to challenge the way you do things before you find yourself in a situation where you're leading people with real lives, and if we make a mistake, there's a significant degree of collateral damage because we didn't get it right. That doesn't mean we have to get everything right, but we have to demonstrate an intellectual humility and a responsibility to put ourselves in those situations before we're actually in those situations. So we can build so that when we get in those situations, we can have clarity on multiple different courses of action because we've challenged our ideas, we've challenged our mental frameworks. And if we do this, we're going to see ourselves, we're going to thrive as individuals, we're going to see ourselves growing more healthy as we're not controlled by our circumstances. We're going to grow in our leadership. We're going to be more healthy as we lead people. We're not going to be controlled by our circumstances and the changing ebb and flow of culture and technology and people. But instead, we're going to lead well. And we're going to navigate the difficulties of leadership because we have exposed ourselves to multiple different ideas. We've demonstrated humility. And ultimately, Max Lucado says it really best. Like, he breaks down teachability to this. He just says, if you're teachable, you are demonstrating a willingness to learn, unlearn, and relearn. If that's a cycle we find ourselves in, I want to learn something, which is great. I have to be willing to say that's not the ultimate only way to do it. I'm going to unlearn it, and then I'm going to learn something new. And I'm going to embody that cycle over and over and over again. And I'm going to demonstrate, grow health, and I'm going to help model health for the people I'm leading. And we're going to see great things in our organization, in our team, and in our own lives as we embrace this intellectual humility.